So I made an Avatar of the Last Airbender video thing last year, and it was one of the biggest and most challenging projects I've ever taken on to date. From challenging myself to make a space montage that can rival some Hollywood productions, to wanting to push the outer limits of my computer at the time. This is why and how I made APPA, an Avatar chapter. This is where it all started. The last shot of my space video and a box with an RTX card in it. After my space video and the journey making of it, I finally convinced myself to upgrade to a better machine, especially if I'm going to take 3D seriously, and be ready for Cyberpunk. When I got my DU upgrades, I struggled a bit to think of what was going to be the next big thing. I wanted to push my new machine so badly, but I had no idea what to make. I dabbled a bit in footage rendering since that's always heavy to render. I ended up with a short creepy video of two hikers, one being mildly possessed.
What are you doing? Stop it! Please, stop. Please, you're scaring me.
The video did do really well on TikTok for some obscure and unexplained reason, so there's that. When I was done with that project, I still felt unsatisfied. My render times were too fast for me to take a proper break and jam some peasant games on TV. I needed to push things further, but how and what? The answer came to me through a not so subtle fan base on Facebook and 9gag. Turns out Avatar of the Last Airbender got brought back from the grave on Netflix. Folks were ecstatic, even me. I used to be a fan before it was cool, even though it was a Nickelodeon giant and every kid in school used to watch it. So I started scripting some ideas out. I originally wanted to do something with Anne and show some elemental bending, but one problem. I suck at doing character animation. I can't even dare think of making a human look like, well, a human. So I resorted to making an APPA only short. This way I can finally practice hair simulation and large environmental rendering as this cuddly beast flies through it. After a few days of scripting, I finally landed on a short yet involving script. I'll show it on screen, but the idea was APPA was going to be one of those few remaining bison to escape from the Western Air Temple as the Fire Nation is hunting them for their pelts and resources. So there were plans to show baby bison getting caged, adults being tortured till they pass out, but that got scrapped, time constraints, and I just felt uncomfortable altering the feel of Avatar. Can somebody just tell that to Netflix and not to change things in live action adaptations? Thanks. Now that I got to script done, it was finally time to set a tone and get some quality music for this project. Only thing was, Hans Zimmer crawled back into his cave after Martin composed the track for my space video. Per Hans. So I asked Martin to compose a 1-minute song that contains 3 iconic Avatar songs into one mega mashup. Something that wraps around the story and visuals, and also have exact timing to some key plots. Easy, for me, because I didn't make music. Martin does.
Whatever, Obi said. Hi, Martin here. So after the space project Obi and I did, we agreed to take the rest of the year all chill and make smaller scope projects. As it turned out, Obi has no chill. He pitched an Avatar, The Last Airbender animation that would be on the scale of a Hollywood production. And somehow, I agreed to compose music for it. Sadly. This project turned out to be a mild nightmare. The Avatar fanbase is extremely hard to please, and Obi kept on and on about that. I soon found out he was one of those fans, super picky and obsessed with flying polar bear dog things. There was a lot of sending music back and forth, quite a lot of frustration and keyboard smashing, but at the end everything turned out to be beyond perfect. Basically, my goal was to combine some elements from the original show. You may recognize some melodies, but it was kinda hard to fit the music to what was going on in the video. We had a quiet part, action scenes, a big reveal in under 80 seconds. That's not a lot of time. So how did I do it? Well, we have a melody, chords, and bass. Heavy drums. even heavier drums, not so heavy drums, effects, a lot of effects, and I mean a whole lot of effects. Horns, big horns, this cute and quiet part, things going up, things going down. Oh, and this, it's so emotional.
So for APPA, I wanted to make him look huggable. Something like this, but not that. Anything but that. Just not that. I started sculpting from whatever reference images I could find online. This part was extremely tricky and boring for me. I still hate sculpting to this day. When I had the base body done, it was time to sculpting the eyes. This took me a full day to learn, just to settle with the perfect eye shape. After trial and error, I somewhat settled with the eye shape Stitch has, from Lilo and Stitch. It seemed to fit APPA's body shape really well, and would allow him to express more emotion compared to that thing. When it was done and sculpted, I could finally start doing retopology. Most folk tend to hate retopology, though I somewhat find it meditating? Whatever. Doing the topology for APPA took me a week of free time alone. At the end, I was really happy about it. After doing the UVs and sloppily painting the textures, he was finally ready to be rigged. And oh boy, out of all the things in CG, sculpting, rigging, and making doors, I hate the most. It's not tedious, just extremely fiddly, especially if you gotta weight paint a giant blubberbutt with 6 feet and a tail. I reflected back to the script and marked all the essential things what APPA needed to do in this animation. Carefully planned out every face shape, doing my best to get away with the bare minimum that's gonna be needed for the short. You can find the rig for free on Blendswap and judge me there. The hair grooming part I enjoyed the most out of this project. Besides, this whole project was a reason for me to practice fur and large environmental rendering. So I spent quite a lot of time on making the fur look and feel right. And not explode in physics sense. And this is the big part, making the environment. After I was done rigging APPA, I quickly cobbled a few blocks and doors together to make a rough cinematic, just to help me and Martin get the timing and scale right. At the time, I was quite naive, thinking it would be fun to do a full 1-minute sequence of a detailed environment in one large take. Oh boy, that caused so much memory management issues and stitching glitches at the end of the day, but I was determined to make this work. Working from a blocked out cinematic file, I started blocking out the environment off into chunks. I worked my schedule around to 1 week per chunk, carving out the environments on a daily basis. At the time, I did a live stream of everything I did. Glad I did. My machine was running low on storage space, due to APPA's files alone. For the environment, I tended to look up a lot of Tibetan temples, with a dash of Japanese aesthetics for these environment chunks. For example, here would be a little meditating area for the younger students. It's somewhat a cave, so they don't try to fly off and hurt themselves. Then as we elevate to the second place, this would be a combat training place for the older groups of students. There would also be this imaginary scoreboard with some ancient text on it. It's just some textures I found on textures.com. No idea what it says. Throughout making this environment, I somewhat lived myself into this place, making up stories about areas and imagining how air monks would use this space, just to make this environment seem believable and plausible, somehow. I was finally ready to start animating. This took me so much longer than I would have hoped for. I'm not much of a character animator, nor an expert on how a chunky air bison would react to getting the snoot built. This took me 3 weeks. Maybe more, because I was still fixing rig issues and environment glitches for a long time during this period. That brings us to the rendering part, and I've skimmed on so many elements like the other family of flying bison, the air staff in the beginning, or the whole plethora of air temples. But I feel just talking about asset creation the whole time might get a bit boring. So if reception to this video does well, I can make a follow-up video on discussing the smaller details and maybe answer some questions. Rendering this was a nightmare. It generally kept me up at night. For the first time in my 3D career, I went over 18 gigs in video memory. My GPU only has 8. I did everything in the book from decimation to tessellation, and I was stumped for days. In fact, I did end up splitting the whole scene into different camera takes. That didn't help as much. After 2 weeks of trial and error just to get one frame out under 15 minutes, I finally found the culprit. Megascans does not compress textures. I do understand the whole quality and rendering part, but oh boy. I've managed to crush around 10 GB of texture files down to 1 GB using XNConvert. Just simply master export the textures and it instantly fixed my issue. I just want to say the built-in simplify features Blender has only takes memory management so far.
Back to rendering.
And it's rendering. The frame times average around 5 to 10 minutes per frame, with sample counts ranging from 256 to 500. A bit low for a project of this scope and scale, I know. I made do with what a single PC could do in off hours. After a month of on and off rendering and bug fixes, it was finally ready to move on to the next phase.
Secondary elements.
This was where I animated the Fire Nation and trebuchets, as well as the pyrotechnics. All the flames and smoke elements was a match between Mantle Flow and the demo of Emperor Jan. I used the VDB workflow religiously for this part. Being able to bake simulations in a different Blender file and just importing it into the main scene worked wonders. Once that was done, it was finally off to compositing.
A lot of compositing jargon later.
And hey, it looks perfect. All the elements combined, a good looking background with believable atmosphere, a stellar soundtrack. After watching the YouTube premiere and reading the comments, I was shaky, nervous yet relieved. It felt as if I personally did justice to my childhood cartoon, something I'll be proud of for a long time to come. For that, I just want to say thanks to everyone who helped me on this project and everyone who left a compliment. It really does make projects like these worth it. Now, on another note, I wanted to formally mention my next big project, but since it's still in early development, I might as well just spill the beans in this video. I'm planning on making a full 15 to 20 minute pilot episode throughout the span of 2021. Oh boy, it's a big one. I might need some help on this at one stage. So I'm looking for animators, 3D artists, and voice actors on this one. This is going to be a passion project of its own, so mainly volunteers. But on that note, I did plan production to be mainly a one-man band project. But who knows, send your acting demo or animation reel to the email down below in the description. Okay, I'm gonna end this video. Cheers.